I was lost without a flashlight. I got separated and it was just feeling around, walking in the darkness. And eventually I realized that I was lost and I just stayed where I was the whole time and waited.
Where it transitioned for me from, oh, that's a nice story that should be shared at family reunions,
Yeah.
to like, oh, this is a film that should be made, was he said, I wasn't scared because I could feel angels with me.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Saints Unscripted. Today we have some incredibly special guests. I am so excited to have these guests on. We have here with us today Garrett and Josh. Josh has experienced an incredible miracle when he was a child, and Garrett has recently made a movie depicting that miracle, and I was able to watch it, and I was blown away.
Oh, good.
Emotional. It's amazing. And so I guess just to start off, do you guys want to just introduce yourselves a little bit and then we'll kind of talk about the movie and the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina, for having us. This is, I'm excited to be here. And I love talking about the movie and more importantly, talking about Josh's story because it is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, my name is Garrett Batty. I'm a writer, director, producer. I've been making films for 20 years. I did a movie called Saratov Approach, which was about missionaries that were kidnapped in Russia. And then some missionary movies about missionaries in Africa.
I've seen both of those.
Oh, good. Okay. And then I did one about Liberty Jail called Out of Liberty. I'm drawn to these faith-based, faith-promoting stories. That's how I came into contact with Josh.
Yeah, and I'm Josh. I met Garrett about 2 years ago. He was interested in making a movie about this experience that our family had. And it's been a long time. It happened 35 years ago this year.
Wow.
And really the experience for me, the special part about this story is the people that rallied around our family and searched for me. What happened was I was 10 years old and we were at a camp with our church. Back then, Boy Scouts was a really big part of our young men experience in church. And we went to an abandoned mine in Tooele County area, and I got lost. And they just kept searching for me and had no clues about what happened. And just kept searching and searching and searching and didn't give up. And it brought a lot of people together, and it's been a special experience for me ever since.
Yeah, Josh was in an abandoned mine for 5 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And without food or water or light.
Right.
And without a miracle or without the faith to have miracles happen, I don't think anyone could have survived that.
Yeah, part of the experience was that I didn't realize I was gone that long. I didn't know that I was lost at that time. For me, it felt that I was there overnight into the next day, and I didn't feel the time, and I was calm, felt comforted, and I experienced what we read about Paul in the New Testament. He calls it the peace that passes all understanding. And it's something that doesn't logically make sense under those circumstances, but that's how I felt. I just waited and felt that someone was going to find me, and it just is a matter of just being patient and waiting for that to happen.
Do you feel like there was ever a moment where you lost that faith, or did you really feel like someone would come?
Yeah, there wasn't a moment where I felt in danger. I didn't feel like it was a life-threatening situation. And for me, feeling that I was there overnight into the next day felt like forever. I felt like this is crazy. It's taken too long. I can't believe I spent one night in a mine by myself in the dark. And that felt really long. But there wasn't a moment where I felt that I was going to die, that they weren't going to find me. It was just a matter of when, like, how long is this going to take? A couple more hours? That's what was in my thoughts.
Yeah, wow.
That's what's so amazing too, is that you're in this area where there's kind of this peace and maybe comfort. And, just on the other side of that mine entrance is this chaos of this desperation, this race against time, this ticking clock. We have to find this kid. And the fact that it's just, they cannot find him. Like, they've combed the mine over and over and over and can't find him. And as a filmmaker, that's an exciting story to tell. It's like, how do we, one, portray that, and then do it in a way that does justice to really what was happening to both individuals, both groups of people in that scenario.
Yeah, I think that the juxtaposition of those two emotions was very prevalent in the movie as well. I think you did a really good job of showing that there was like peace and the presence of angels within the mines, and then desperation on the outside.
Yeah, Josh, when you explained it to me, that was sort of the sentiment that I got, is that feeling of peace, but also you were in pitch black. I mean, is that right?
I guess around here, people are familiar with Timpanogos Cave. And if you've ever been inside of a mine or a cave and you turn off the lights, your eyes don't adjust to anything because there's nothing to adjust to. It's complete darkness. And that's what it was like inside mine. So I was lost without a flashlight. I got separated and was left in that darkness. And it was just feeling around, walking in the darkness. And eventually I realized that I was lost, and I just stayed where I was the whole time and waited and couldn't see anything. I fell asleep, and it was a disorienting feeling, waking up and opening your eyes and still not being able to see anything, and then realizing, oh yeah, kind of take me a moment to realize where I was. And it happened to me a couple times that I remember falling asleep and waking up and being in that darkness the whole time.
Wow. So with this happening quite like, it was 1989, right? That to now you decide to make a movie out of it. I'm wondering, how did you decide that? How did you learn about this story in the first place and then want to make a movie about it?
So that's a great question. And I do a lot of directing, and I was directing content for the church has done Book of Mormon videos. And so I was directing one of those, and the producers of those reached out to me because Josh's wife is an extra in those films. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So she spoke, and she's just a sweetheart. And she spoke to some of the producers and said, hey, my husband has a really interesting story, and maybe you guys would want to make it a movie. And that's not something that they do, but they were familiar with my work and reached out and said, hey, here's a story. And I get a lot of those calls, honestly, about once a week. Somebody comes with a story or an idea or wonderful experience that they feel should be a movie. And so when these guys reached out and said, hey, call this lady, she was on our set, and her husband had an amazing experience. And so I called because I love hearing stories. And so I called and spoke with her and heard briefly about your story. And I was intrigued, and I felt, okay, this is a story that I'd love to find out more about, whether it makes a movie or not. And then, I think I sat down with you in your home, and you told me the whole experience.
Right, yeah.
And was your mom there at the time?
I think when we initially spoke, she wasn't, and then in other meetings, she was there, and she shared with you from her perspective what happened.
Yeah. And what immediately caught me, where it transitioned for me from, oh, that's a nice story that should be shared at family reunions, to like, oh, this is a film that should be made, was that Josh and I, it's not a spoiler because we know you make it out, but you said, I wasn't scared because I could feel angels with me. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting element. If I were just a news reporter, I could report the news. Here's Josh and he's trapped in the mine. As a storyteller and filmmaker, I get to try to put voices to those maybe that don't have voices or fill in the blanks. The fact that Josh says, I felt angels with me, is something that immediately kind of spoke to me and drew me toward the story. Fast forward a couple of weeks later, and you'll see in the film is about a man that has this prompting that he should help in this rescue. And I sat with him in his home and said, hey, tell me about this experience of you being involved with Josh. And him saying, I felt there were angels that were helping me. Or him sharing a story of outside the mine where Josh was, of him finding a little angel statue.
That's real.
It's a real story. And so from my perspective, I'm hearing Josh talk about these angels and John Skinner talk about angels. And then Josh's family had sent me emails and, or I guess handwritten archival accounts from everybody else that was involved. And there is mentions of angels and the spirit and promptings and things that were bigger than any one individual.
Yeah.
I go, okay, this story could resonate with a lot of people because we all have felt some sort of prompting or angelic guidance throughout our lives. And this is a great example of what happens when we follow those.
Something that was really powerful for me when I was watching that was, so there's like a depiction of a family home evening and the teaching of faith and the little mustard seed, and how when he loses the little mustard seed in the carpet and then he's looking for it, and then the mom is like, nah, it's gone. We'll vacuum it, it's fine. That part right there is so cool because children, I think we need to remember how close children are to God and how close they can be, and how when he comes out of there saying, I wasn't afraid, there were angels, like he really felt that. And just because he's young doesn't mean that he can't have that experience. And I think sometimes when people are older, we let like the stress of situations like cloud that, and we don't let our minds be open to that. And that John, the adult in the situation who was able to also feel that and connect to the spirits around, was the reason why you were found, right? And
yeah, it was an amazing story. And yeah, you got Josh that's lost in the mine, and you can't put a camera in the dark mine for 2 hours, so we had to find another access point to the story. And it is about this stranger that has this impression or prompting that he's supposed to find Josh. Has no connection to the story, to Josh, other than he's fascinated by the mines and happened to play in that mine as a kid. And so it was a neat access point from both of those. Josh, you shared with me 2 memories that you had in the mine, right? And we tried to portray those in the movie. And you mentioned the family home evening. I mean, that was a real thing. Is that right?
Oh, wow. I love that part.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was actually just 5 days before we went on this excursion and I got lost. We had a family home evening and it was about faith. Then it had that scripture in Matthew 17:20 about having faith as a grain of mustard seed. And if you have that faith, you can move mountains and nothing will be impossible.
And you had a little bag.
There was a little bag of seeds that was one of the ladies that shared with little kit, some study helps.
And it's the same bag we used in the movie. Like they saved it.
That is amazing.
Isn't that? We have to make sure that we tell people we used stunt mustard seeds because we didn't want the real mustard seeds to actually get lost. But it's the real bag.
Yeah. And a poignant memory about that was it was my turn to teach the lesson. So it was what my mom would do, would have us take turns as kids teaching. And we read that scripture together, and I had the little seed, and I said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can do anything. And I was really adamant about it, just really forceful. And my mom was kind of could imagine what was going on in my head, like, okay, let's
like anything.
Well, maybe not anything. And I said, no, you can do anything. It says right here, Jesus says, if you have faith in him, you can do anything. And that goes to the faith of a child, right?
Yeah.
Just this pure faith that you just, you believe. And so that was what happened leading up to this experience. And that feeling was with me, is nothing's impossible. You have faith. And inside the mine, as I was lost and separated in the dark, I prayed, and there was just no doubt in my mind that I can't see anything, but I know that God knows where I am. And that calmed me. It was a very comforting feeling, knowing that I wasn't lost to him.
Yeah.
And that he was listening to my prayers. And there was just no doubt. There was no feeling of doubt. And so as I've grown older and we get more cynical, we have bad experiences in our lives, and I have relied on this experience. I've thought about it over and over again. And my dad said something to me shortly after I was found that rang true for me. He said, someday you will need to rely on the faith that you had when you were lost. And I thought about that a lot. And when I've had the tendency to be doubtful or not believe, I've thought about that. And I'm like, if we have just a little bit of faith, if we can just believe a little bit, just have a particle of faith, miracles can happen in our lives. And so I've tried to to maintain that faith, or at least try to recover some of that, just to have that belief of a child, and when we go through hard things.
Yeah.
It's been a helpful lesson for me too, like hearing you. Certainly that resonated with you at the time, and then as we've talked about the story where you've expressed, this is a theme. It's about faith. Like faith is a key part. Making a movie is hard, and the journey has not been easy, but I think of the faith that, Josh had in the mind as a kid, and we can do anything, and that's helpful to like keep going. Okay, we got to get this story out there. We're going to overcome anything. We're going to get this story in theaters across the country, and if it's by faith, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
So it's a powerful lesson and can be applied to anything.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about the movie, if I could share,
Yeah, of course.
was that the star of the movie is John Skinner, the one that found me, that didn't know us beforehand, but felt that prompting to not give up and to keep searching and keep trying to help. And those that were with him when I was found, that helped him. And I love that focus, and that was one of my hopes with telling the story, because this isn't my story. It's a lot of people's story. A lot of people were involved, and not only that, but I've come to learn over time that not only is it not just my story when it happened, but it's an experience that everyone can relate to. Maybe not literally, but it's really everyone's story. We all go through hard things. We feel lost, or we have someone that we love that is lost or going through a hard time. And there's people that don't give up, and they search for them. They reach out to them. They rally together to help them. We have these experiences where we feel help from beyond what we can see, those promptings from the Holy Spirit, or we feel the presence of someone close to us that's maybe passed on, that is with us and helping us. And that's what I love about telling the story, is that hopefully people will be able to identify and see themselves in this experience.
Yeah.
And to remember those experiences that they've had, where they've had shown faith, they've exercised faith, or they felt presence of God in their lives, or maybe someone close to them that's helping them.
Yeah. I definitely was able to relate it to myself, and I've never been lost in a mine or had anything. Actually,
right,
I've never had anything crazy happen to me. But one thing that was stuck out to me was just with John having these promptings and following them. I think about, there's been times where people I know or myself, where there's promptings that you have, and there's a part of you that does like, right? But you gotta listen to them, because it could be a matter of someone's life. It could be a matter of something else that's major. And if we are connecting ourselves with the Spirit and being in tune, then when those promptings come, then we can be, working for God and for His good.
I love that. And I like to imagine, because of this story, I like to imagine that, yes, there's the Holy Ghost is there giving us promptings, and there's probably this army of angels that are wishing we would listen, like, listen, then why won't you hear me? Why won't you let me into the mine, or whatever it is? Or why won't you take action? Or celebrating when we do, when we do respond, that we say, okay, good. Message received. And so that's kind of there's this theme in the movie, where the prompting, or the feeling that John receives, is to help them see, right? And he doesn't necessarily know what that means, and it's not easy for him to understand what that means, or really to make that happen, even if he did know what it means. And I think that's that way in all of our lives, is that sometimes it's not easy to respond to an angelic prompting, or the Holy Ghost prompting us, whether that's because of self-doubt, like, oh, is that me, or the Spirit, am I thinking that? Or there are actual physical obstacles that are stopping us from moving forward. This movie hopefully represents both of those, and is relatable to anybody.
So when we're talking about how in the movie there's certain things like Family Home Evening, which is very specific to Latter-day Saints, or kind of like they talk about church and the way that they pray. Would you say that this movie is just for people who understand that?
Good question. No, and I mean, the movie, Josh's story, I think resonates with anybody. I can attest to that, because as we sent the script out for actors to audition, the people that came into this movie, I mean, the lead is John Michael Finley, who is an incredible Broadway star, whose first film was a movie called I Can Only Imagine, and he's not at all familiar with Latter-day Saint culture, but absolutely resonated with the story. The sheriff, our sheriff, is played by Cameron Arnett, who is, from Georgia. He's been in 70 plus movies. He's in like The Overcomer, faith-based movies that are not targeted toward an LDS audience. And they both respond and said, this is an incredible story. This is so relatable. I can't believe like there's this amazing faith theme and angels, and we want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And we've shown the movie subsequently to audiences outside of, Latter-day Saint culture, and the response has been phenomenal, just incredible. So, we might have a Monday night family home evening in our culture, but certainly teaching Bible principles to a family is universal. I mean, that applies everywhere. Yeah. And I can tell you that those that read the script, there was nothing in it that they thought, oh, I feel excluded or confused or not.
There's one thing I was thinking about, that character. There's a character, Kyle, in the story. And when I first watched it, I was like, why don't we get to see Kyle at the end? And then I realized, wait, we all are kind of Kyle, because we all kind of come into certain things thinking like, oh, well, it's just whatever. Like he's like sitting there like, the stars are just stars. I don't care. I don't want to go. And I'm pretty sure that the way that we feel at the end of that miracle is the way that he would have felt at the end of that miracle. And that just came to me now that I'm like, we don't see the end of him because we are the end of him. And
yeah, no, that's fun. That's a good, I love showing the movie to people because everybody takes different things out of it. And Kyle is a fun character. He was one of the guys that we've tried to figure out how we're going to show so many kids involved with this. And so we kind of made this amalgamation of characters and named him Kyle. But he does kind of represent that oftentimes there's things happening right in front of us that we don't necessarily connect the dots. Mm-hmm. Right. And we gently kind of say, Kyle, look, A plus B equals C. And that's kind of you can see the hand of God operate that way. And goes, it feels like random letters to me.
Yeah.
And we do pay off Kyle, though, because he does help search for Josh.
Oh, yeah.
Which we were excited that even though in the beginning Kyle was maybe indifferent to things, that he would take the time to show up and participate in that search. And so that was kind of his little arc.
Yeah.
There was a second memory that Josh shared with me, and I'll mention that because I teased it before. I said there were two things.
Oh, right.
That you said. And the second one, you want to say what the second one was?
Sure. Yeah, I remember a very vivid dream that I had while I was lost, and I was at my school cafeteria, and so I started feeling really hungry, as you can imagine. And so in my dream, I was at my elementary school in the line to get lunch. And it was very peculiar because it was dark. Like the darkness I was enveloped in was just even making it into my subconscious, I guess, because I could see very well.
Yeah.
And we made my way to the front to get lunch, and I was just so hungry. And I was so excited because we were having hamburgers and fries, which I don't know in the history of school lunches if we ever had like a nice juicy hamburger with fries, maybe some other kind of hamburger.
Not a nice
but
one.
That day it was just looked so good. And I took my tray to sit down, and I looked away just for a moment, and I looked back down at my tray, and the food was gone. It disappeared. And it was just so hungry. And I woke up and I had a rock in my hand, and I pressed it to my mouth,
like chewing on that.
And I took me a while. I was disoriented, and it felt so real. And I woke up, and now I'm still in a mine, and I don't have any food.
Oh my goodness! I'm like, I've had a dream before of like a Thanksgiving spread, and then I get bummed when I wake up, but then I can just go to the kitchen. So I can't imagine waking up with a rock in your hand. Oh my goodness!
So it was fun to hear that he remembered that vividly. So we tried to portray that in the film as well.
Yeah, and that part was sad.
Yeah, I can't imagine what you must have been going through.
Okay, so in the news reports about this incident, it says that like a day before you were actually found, that you could hear the people who were searching for you, but they weren't able to hear you, or they couldn't find you in that moment. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. So probably one of the better explanations is where I ended up in the dark, because So the moment that I was separated, I tried to feel my way out to where I thought was the entrance of the mine.
Mhm.
We had gone in maybe about 1,000 yards, I think was what they determined from the entrance of the mine where I was last seen. And I was walking in the dark, couldn't see anything, feeling alongside the wall of the mine. And I started going upward. And
Mm.
in this mine, if you see the real pictures of what it looked like back then, it was just a hole in the ground. And you had to lower yourself down a little bit until you get into the tunnels where it opens up and you go searching
Oh,
through.
okay, yeah.
And so I was going up and I just feeling my way, thinking, oh, I'm close to the entrance because I have to get up and out. And I was
Mm.
expecting at some moment I'm going to emerge and find the entrance and get out of there. But I kept going up higher and higher and higher, and I would slip back down, and finally I got to a part where I was leveled off a little bit, and I scurried to get to some level ground. And what ended up happening is I found the perfect hiding place where I went up there was a big area called a stope in a mine. It's where they excavate and it becomes like a huge room, basically, just this big opening area. And so on the side where the wall's just full of just loose gravel and rubble and things. And so I scurried up that, made it up into a little ore cavity, just this little teeny tunnel. And I reached a part, just for me, I was just feeling in the dark. I didn't
Can't see
really
a thing.
know what was going on or where I was at or imagine it really. But I could tell that I was maybe at a dead end area as I felt around. And that's where I waited and I prayed and said, okay, I'm just there. Someone will find me and I'll just wait here. And so I ended up finding this little area that was hidden. And that's why one of the reasons it was so hard for them to find me is because they searched through and through this mine. And the mine is called the Hidden Treasure Mine. And it's has 6 different levels. So levels going through the mountain, going down. It was massive and about 21 miles of tunnel.
Wow.
So it's massive. And they were convinced that they had searched the entire thing multiple times. Like there wasn't a single spot that they hadn't searched. But I found this little spot that
Mm.
you couldn't see from walking on the ground level there. Couldn't see looking up. You wouldn't really even be able to tell there was this little cavity up there, this little tunnel that I'd made my way into.
Yeah. They don't
And
think about scaling the walls to find you.
Well, and I think what's amazing to me too is that that they couldn't find you, but you could hear them yelling for you, and when you'd respond, they wouldn't hear you.
yes, I remember two times distinctly that I heard some noise in the distance, and one time it, I cried out for help, but I could barely make a sound, like my voice and
Yeah.
the dehydration, which I didn't really understand at the time. I didn't think about that. I just tried to yell out for help, and the noise faded away and it was gone. And that was one time I remember hearing some noise and crying out for help. The second time was when they found me, and I heard some noise, cried out for help, but this time someone heard me, and that's a whole other story. about,
Yeah, I mean, it's an
that's another
amazing story,
miraculous
right?
thing. Yeah.
Because I talked with Josh and then talked with John Skinner, who
Mhm.
was the kind of the guy that he's the protagonist of the movie,
Mhm.
and then you have all the different rescue workers, right, that have come in, and these are professional search and rescue guys. This was not their first experience, and they have a method where they put the ribbons,
Mhm.
and they walk forward, yell out for Josh, put ribbons up, and they say that in about a day and a half, you can cover 22 miles of mine. So now they're repeating after a day and a
Yeah.
half. They got to repeat. Different color ribbon goes up, and they're retracing their steps, yelling out for Josh. Can't find him. Can't hear him. There's this level of frustration that they start to experience of saying, "This is insane. Like he is not in there." And there was a whole bunch of speculation as to maybe Josh isn't even in there. Maybe
Yeah.
he's escaped or gotten out and is hiding, or perhaps some foul play, or what there were more people that believed that he wasn't in there than those that were willing to say, oh, maybe we just missed him. 5 days later, when he is found, as we portray in the movie, hopefully accurately, there were search ribbons within 8 feet of where Josh was.
Mhm.
So to me, as a filmmaker, I try to say, okay, well, let's solve this story. Let's figure it out. And I can try to find the facts and go like, okay, well, maybe at that moment he was asleep, and so they yelled out and they couldn't hear him. And then you talk to anybody like Josh or John Skinner or Ray and Gary, who were the rescue workers with them, and they all just say, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. Ray and Gary are there at the time. Ray is hard of hearing in one ear, and he's the guy that hears Josh's faint whimper on day 5. And you go, and Ray says, for 5 minutes, my hearing was restored, just enough to be able to find this boy. Gary is walking, trying to climb up, respond to this feeling, and he tells that Josh fell into his arms. At some point, I have to say, look, as a filmmaker, great. As a person of faith, let's accept the miracle. Like, just accept, hey, there are a series of miracles that have happened here. And why? Because I think this story, over 35 years, and continues to be this example that even President Bush at the time says, this is evidence that miracles happen. I think in a time right now, there's no message more powerful than that.
Okay, so when you're found, in the movie it shows that you ask, are you angels? And then I think it's John that says, no, but they're here. Did something like that happen? Or, I mean, if not, the sentiment still is there, right? But
yeah, the sentiment definitely was there. Those little words, I think that was a beautiful way in the movie to articulate what the feeling that was there. But in my mind, I was fully expecting my father to find me or one of the other scout leaders. I was just waiting for them. And when I see these strangers, it was confusing. And I thought like, oh, who are these guys? Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting parts of my experience when it started to dawn on me what had just happened is they were just so excited to see me. They just kept saying, I just remember hearing him say over and over again, thank God we found him. Thank God we found him. And I'm wondering, why are these guys so excited to see me?
You're like, I haven't been gone that long.
Yeah, for a day and a half.
And I remember distinctly Gary, who was carrying me out, he said, we're going to take you to your mom and dad. And I think he was trying to calm me down, like, it's going to be okay. We're going to take you to your mom and dad. And my response was just so strange for him. I had said, well, my dad's outside, but my mom's at home.
It's like, no, she's not.
And he's thinking like, what's going on in this kid's mind?
Yeah.
And he asked me if I knew what day it was. As he's carrying me out, I'm thinking to myself, maybe it's, the next day, late Saturday or something. Maybe I'd been in there. Is it possible that I'd been in there 2 days? I don't know. And he tells me it's Wednesday and that they've been looking for me for 5 days. And it just didn't sink in. And the only worry that I had was that I had missed 3 days of school. That was really my biggest concern. I'm like, oh no, how could it be Wednesday?
Wow.
And so for me, it was that speaks volumes about what I experienced. It just wasn't a traumatic experience. The trauma was what my parents experienced. They were grappling with the loss of their son. They had, by that 5th day, they had come to accept that I was gone, that I had died. And maybe the worst part about it was that they would never know what happened to me. They would never know. And they would, the mine would become my grave, and they wouldn't even truly have known if that was really where I was or not. That was really painful for them and everyone that was looking for me. And so here I am in the worst conditions, but not feeling that at all. And I was in a place of peace and no fear. And everyone else was just grappling with the chaos of the vanished boy and the pain that I was gone.
That's so powerful.
It was neat it was powerful to talk to your mom and get her experience and kind of what she was going through.
Yeah.
And then to figure out how to portray that, and I can't imagine her journey. I mean, for anybody, that'd be a parent's worst nightmare. And yet for it to end up how it did and to see who she is today, it's another, just again, a testament of faith that she had, and it all turned out all right.
And at the very end of the movie, when it kind of shows the news clips, it talks about how if John hadn't had like a fascination about his family history, then he wouldn't have been curious about the mines and wouldn't have known where things are, and then he wouldn't have been there to save him.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about just the importance of family history in this story?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, John's a fascinating character and a fascinating individual, and Josh rightfully says that he's a personal hero of him, and he has become one for me too, just because of his down to earthness and tenacity and never give up, never say die attitude. We ran into John when I was looking for locations for the movie. I was driving up. We shot the movie in Ophir, Utah, which is a town of about 37 people. And when I was looking for places to film, I was up there on just a location scout with my son. And because Ophir's such a small town, the townsperson came out and, saw two strangers and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" And we said, "Oh, we're just looking around. We might do a movie here. We're telling a story about a boy that was lost in a mine." And they said, "Oh, you know who you need to talk to? You should talk to John Skinner. He lives right down there." I thought, what? And so we knocked on his door and got introduced and met with John, and he brought us in and showed us all this collection of things that he had found throughout his experiences, either just as hiking or fishing or whatever it is. I mean, he's just one of these incredible historians and an archivist, and has an amazing story. And then he pulled out binders of his family history and their connection to the mine. And it immediately became interesting and somewhat apparent that there are those people that are rooting for us that have gone on before us. And if John is receiving, if he's got this ability to understand the mine and also his family connection to the mine, that it would make sense that perhaps one of those angels that's helping guide him would be connected to him via his family line. And so I started thinking about that from a story standpoint and say, who is it then that is comforting Josh? Who's with Josh if he's saying, "I'm feeling that angels were with me"? Certainly the Holy Ghost is the comforter, but I think that we hear plenty of general authorities talk about angels being a part of our lives, and they being those that are, family members or connections. And so that played a role in who we suggested would be the angel that's comforting Josh. And the movie makes hints to that through various characters and a couple of scenes of John Skinner's wife, Chris, doing some family history. And she's amazing. I think she put the whole thing together as far as, okay, John's supposed to do this and I'll just encourage him. And she was just patient with him while he figured it out, and it was in the background doing family history.
Wow. Okay, so there is still so much more we could unpack with this story and with the movie and the inspiration. I just think maybe to kind of wrap up, I have to ask you, what is the one thing that you think, now releasing this movie, however many years later from when it actually happened, what do you want people to take from it? Just like in a thought.
In a thought. As far as the takeaway, I certainly hope the audiences go to it and they're entertained. I think that's why you go to a movie is, it might be a great story, but you can really mess it up if you make it boring. And
true.
So we wanted to make it entertaining, and I think that the crew and the cast and everybody that's worked on it has done a good job of making it very entertaining. Mm-hmm. I would love for them to go away inspired and say, okay, are there angels in my life that are helping me or influencing me? And what are they trying to do? And I think the role of an angel is to help us see the hand of God in our lives. And we can read scriptural accounts of angels, and anytime there's interactions with an angel and an individual, is to help point them towards God. And I think, is that what so in those times where I felt a prompting or a thought or somebody nudging me, I need to look for God at that time. And I hope that their audience, wherever they see it, walks away with that. Like, okay, there are angels with me and they're helping me see God. It's not a coincidence that it's 35 years since this happened, and this movie hits theaters the exact anniversary of the weekend that Josh was found.
Wow.
Across the country. And I think, again, where I'm just a little I'm a steward of this story at this time. It belongs to the audience right now, and so they can just take it and run with it. And we're just thrilled that people are willing to share it and to buy a ticket for it, and then to talk about it after they see it.
Mm-hmm. They will talk about it. For sure. And Josh, do you have any final things you would like to share?
Yeah, I've always been quiet and shy, and and I've had a hard time with attention, and what this story generated a lot of that at the time. And I remember just shortly after it happened, I thought to myself, I can't wait until 10 years from now when everyone's forgotten this ever happened. And as a 10-year-old, 10 years, it was my whole lifespan. And so for me,
you'll be an old man by then.
An eternity away. And I've been surprised to some extent that people still remember this experience. But on the other hand, I'm not surprised, because we gravitate towards happy endings, and we were fortunate enough to have a happy ending, and it unfolded in a very dramatic way. But I'd like to reiterate again that it's not just my story. There's a lot of people that had their own experiences connected with the search, and they all have their own story, and they could have a movie made about their experience as well. But not only that, but it's all of our story where we understand how that feels. It feels to me a little bit like one of the parables of Jesus, that there's a story, he tells it, but we can all identify and see ourselves in it. And one part of the story, one way to look at it is, Luke chapter 15 of the lost sheep, the lost piece of silver, or the prodigal son. I mean, this embodies those parables, exactly how he describes them, that something went missing, whether it's a sheep, silver, or a son. But there was this immediate reaction to search, and this understanding of how valuable that thing or person was. And so this was a big camp out for us. There was a lot of boys, and there were 30 of us. We wouldn't say, oh, well, we came back with 29. That's pretty good. We did pretty good. We don't think of it that way. We understand the inherent value of a human being.
Yeah.
And they stopped everything. The camp was over. That what they needed to do is find this boy. You leave the 99 and you go after the one. You search for that piece of silver where, that coin maybe is not very monetarily very important, but you search for it because it's yours. Or that son is precious and you don't give up on them. You just keep trying, you keep searching. And the thing that those three parables have in common is rejoicing and joy when they're found. And when I was found, everyone that knew about it or was connected in some way, they celebrated. It was this joyous occasion. And when I came home from the hospital, this outpouring of love from our friends and neighbors, they gathered at our house. Everyone in there who was there in front of our house, and the car could barely even make it in the driveway. They had to kind of put out of the way. And I will never forget that feeling of support and love for me. Just this little kid, nobody knew, this quiet and shy boy, but because I was someone's son, they were happy for us that I was found, and they rejoiced. And I've had time and time again when I talk to people about it, or they find out oh, I remember that when that happened. And I've had mothers tell me time and time again, when you were lost, you became every mother's son. We could all feel that pain of your mother and that joy when you were found. And the searchers that looked for me and they found me, they said, we couldn't have loved this little boy more if he was our own son. And so that feeling of the worth of a soul, and when you find something that's lost, you rejoice. I think that's what people have connected with in a large measure, and why it hasn't been forgotten, because we want to remember that. And that plays out over and over again. Again, this is not just my story. This happens over and over again. People are lost. There's those that don't give up. They keep searching and they keep finding, and they follow promptings, and they receive help that we cannot see, and miracles happen.
Yes, they do. Thank you so much. I feel like this is going to, and already has, blessed so many lives and will continue to now that it can be made known to people who didn't know about it before. So when the movie comes out, which is what date again?
September 12th.
September 12th.
Yep.
In select theaters.
In select theaters, and
Yep.
then September 26th nationwide.
Oh, that's so exciting. And it's called Faith of Angels. And you've got to watch it. I'm definitely going to take my family and friends. And thank you guys again so much for coming and sharing your story and sharing the reason that you made this movie.
Thank you.
And have a great day.